Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring something that is absolutely fundamental to who you are, your memory. We often tend to think of our memory as just this biological hard drive, right? Like a filing cabinet where we just stuff away facts, names, maybe our Wi-Fi passwords. But the reality is actually so much more fascinating than that. Your memory is literally the fabric of your personal identity. It completely shapes how you experience the present and even how you imagine your future. So today, we're going to unpack this phenomenal storage system inside your head. We'll look at the science behind how it actually works, how surprisingly delicate it can be, and most importantly, how you can actually push its limits.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the fabric of identity, then we'll move into how memories are made and examine when the system breaks. After that, we'll uncover the secrets of memory champions before wrapping the whole thing up with upgrading your brain.
Section 1. The fabric of identity. It's about way more than just facts. There's this really profound idea that, quote, I'd go so far as to say that we are our memories. They define us. And honestly, that perfectly captures the human experience. Take Henrietta, for example. She's a 31-year-old theater actor, and her entire profession relies on these incredible, intricate little mental drawers. It's like she opens one drawer for a specific play, pulls out the dialogue, the emotion, the choreography, and then she just closes it weeks later so she can open another one. For Henrietta, and really for all of us, memories are those invisible threads tying our past selves to exactly who we are in this very moment. Now, what's really fascinating about this is how it breaks down into the two main types of memory that Henrietta uses on stage. On the left side here, we have explicit memory. This is your factual recall, knowing her exact lines, or, knowing that Paris is the capital of France. But on the right is implicit memory. This one is entirely subconscious. It's the muscle memory of her stage choreography, or even just the way you remember how to ride a bike without thinking about it. By perfectly balancing that conscious factual recall with subconscious motor skills, Henrietta can express herself creatively. She basically lets her body take over the physical movements while her mind completely focuses on the raw emotion. Moving right along to section 2, how memories are made, the biology of a thought. So the crucial point here is something called an engram. Every single time you learn a new piece of information, your nerve cells activate. They start communicating by firing chemical messengers and electrical signals across these tiny gaps called synapses. And through this process, your nerve cells undergo permanent physical changes. A literal physical memory trace, which is the engram, is formed right there in your brain. You are actively rewiring your biological hardware with every single new experience. How wild is that? But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Those memory traces, they aren't set in stone. Every time you recall a memory, it gets reactivated, and then it's usually stored again in a slightly modified form. Memory is basically a continuous construction of what was. And perhaps surprisingly, forgetting is an enormously important part of this whole system. If our brains acted like perfect, rigid computers, they'd get completely overcrowded. Forgetting acts as a filter for all the irrelevant noise, which leaves room for a very special quality of the human brain: creativity. Section 3. When the system breaks. The absolute fragility of memory. To really understand the fragility of this system, consider Nicole. She's a 50-year-old stroke survivor, 30%. That massive, devastating drop represents the total cognitive capacity she was left with after suffering several strokes at just 49 years old. And it wasn't just that she couldn't remember what she read in a book. It was the simple, everyday things, like remembering to turn off the stove or flush the toilet. The true devastation of brain damage is that it doesn't just cut off your factual recall. It drastically alters your mood and your self-image. Nicole actually described it as feeling like two completely different people trapped inside the exact same body. But thankfully, there is a profound sense of hope in Nicole's story, because the brain is highly malleable. Even though dead nerve cells can't just be replaced, entirely new connections can form through some pretty incredible rehabilitation techniques like mirror therapy, which visually tricks the brain into thinking a paralyzed limb is actually moving, and virtual reality object placement tasks. Nicole has been training very specific areas of her brain. By essentially forcing the system to adapt, she's forming completely new synapses to bypass the damage, allowing her to regain movement and, most importantly, her independence. All right, let's look at Section 4, Secrets of Memory Champions. We are pushing the limits now. Check out this staggering number, 108. That is the amount of historical dates and completely made-up corresponding events that Johannes, a German memory champion, memorized in just 5 minutes during a memory decathlon. 5 minutes! And here is the kicker. Johannes insists this has absolutely nothing to do with being born a genius or having some naturally photographic memory. None of that. It is purely about technique, which proves exactly what a trained human mind can achieve.
You know, you've probably heard people say the brain is like a muscle. Well, actually, scratch that. Neuroscientists are really glad it isn't because it works so much more efficiently than a muscle. Our brains have this built-in internal navigation system made of place cells and grid cells. These cells naturally map out physical spaces, kind of like how your brain helps you navigate an unfamiliar supermarket. Memory champions like Johannes have essentially figured out how to hijack this spatial mapping system to store non-spatial information, like random numbers or historical dates.
Let's actually try his technique together right now. We'll use your own body as a spatial map, a sort of mini memory palace. Let's say we want to memorize the very first German presidents. Step 1. Imagine a little house resting right on top of your head. House sounds like Heusch, our first president. Step 2. Move down to your chest, right where your heart beats. Heart reminds us of the second president, Herzog. Step 3. Move down to your tummy. Imagine your tummy is upset because you just had a big argument, a row. Row gives us our third president, Johannes Rau. Just by attaching those abstract names to a spatial journey along your own body, you effortlessly memorize them. Pretty cool, right?
And finally, Section 5, upgrading your brain. Let's get into some practical applications. And this brilliantly illustrates a really empowering point. It basically comes down to a 50-50 split. Half of your memory capability is dictated by your genetics, sure, but the other 50% is entirely dictated by your environment and your lifestyle. You are absolutely not helplessly at the mercy of your genes. There is a massive amount of room for improvement, or, decline, based entirely on the daily choices you make. So, what exactly should those daily choices look like? The science gives us some incredibly clear, actionable steps here. First, aerobic exercise. Taking something as simple as a brisk walk in the woods consumes oxygen and keeps the hippocampus, which is the main memory center of your brain, highly active. Second, get a good night's sleep without distractions right after studying. This gives your brain the quiet time it needs to consolidate those new synapses, so they're totally fresh for the next day. And third, emotional connection. If you tie new information to an emotion, it acts like a giant flare to your brain, signaling, hey, this is important, store this permanently. Ultimately, continuous learning is the vital fuel that our memory machinery runs on. We live in a world today where we can just instantly outsource our memory to smartphones or AI like ChatGPT. It's so easy. But the real danger there is that our physical brain needs the exercise. If we stop learning, the machinery quite literally starts to atrophy. Learning leads to understanding, and that spark of understanding naturally motivates us to learn even more. It's a beautiful, positive feedback loop.
Which brings us to our final thought. We started this explainer by establishing that we basically are our memories. Our brains are these incredibly dynamic things, capable of rebuilding after major trauma, mapping out massive, complex palaces of information, and growing stronger with every single new experience. But the machinery demands to be used. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. If your memories quite literally define who you are, what will you choose to learn next?